Was announced in Kenya, and the government swung into swift action, setting guidelines and giving restrictions to curb the spread. However, as we braced for a global pandemic, we failed to prepare for a second wave of challenges looming on the heels of the coronavirus. Tonight, we take stock of the response thus far and the impending socioeconomic fallout from the virus that will linger long after the pandemic is over.
There will be a daily curfew from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. in the morning.
Lockdowns are inconsistent with informal economy.
So you're having so many cases of unwanted pregnancies that are very high, and we're sure things, school dropouts will be very high after this.
I was in a relationship with that boy. Then I found myself pregnant.
98% of girls who have ever been pregnant are out of school.
It is to regularly and thoroughly wash your hands with soap and water.
Right now, here, water is gold. Then how can you waste your gold to wash your hand?
A bird's eye view of Kenya's largest slum. Kibera is home to roughly 185,000 people, according to the 2019 census. It's a sprawling informal settlement that hosts thousands of 12 by 12-foot makeshift homes. This has been the case for decades, and the reason reports had said slums would be the new front line of the coronavirus.
You talk about social distancing, they laugh at you. They live in we call it a plot or a sakati. They live like really congested. They share one pit latrine with over 50 families. I live there, I know it. And then you're telling me that social distancing, like you are sick.
3 months into this global crisis, it was beginning to become clear that Kenya, like many other developing countries, was facing not just a global health pandemic, but a global humanitarian catastrophe. From the onset of the coronavirus, hand washing was touted as the simplest and most effective way to combat the spread. There was one very big and fundamental problem. Only half of Nairobi's residents have piped water into their homes, according to the government-owned Nairobi City Water and Sewerage Company, and Kibera residents fall on the side that doesn't. These are illegal pipes placed there by water cartels, some completely submerged by the river water, putting the residents that eventually draw from these pipes at risk of waterborne diseases. Queuing with yellow jerry cans at water vendors dotted across the slum is the only way they access this vital resource. And the costs are astronomical. On average, a Nairobian who gets regular piped water would pay between 34 and 53 shillings per cubic meter, which is 1,000 liters. In a place like Kibera, however, residents part with as much as 10 shillings for a 20-liter jerry can.
The biggest challenge is when water becomes gold. Then how can you waste your gold to wash your hand? Right now, here, water is gold.
Shofko saw the need and filled it. Here, this is a luxury. When you think about it, water in a place like Kibera, especially clean and safe water, is rare, and it comes at a premium. Well, right now, most residents are getting their water for free from Shofko. But pre-COVID-19 days, you'd find a jerry can going for about 5 shillings, at times going as high as 10 shillings. This is possible because of Shofko's purification plant that provides residents with water at heavily subsidized rates. However, water is only part of the problem. The COVID-19 restrictions meant to curb the spread, such as the nationwide curfew and restricted movement in and out of hotspots, negatively impacted those living in informal settlements.
Lockdowns are inconsistent with informal economies. That is a key thing that we have to think about, because lockdowns affect the vulnerable most. Lockdowns affect the poorest most. So the bigger part of the poor you have, the less likely that a lockdown is going to help you when you do the balance between lives lost because of COVID and lives lost because of other things.
It was a fact the government was aware of, instituting cash stipends and other interventions to help families like those in Kibera weather the storm.
Manake sasa hiyo ukienda hata kutafuta kazi mahali pengine ukisikia unatoka Kibera, you cannot get the job. So sasa ni shida, watu wanakaa kwa wanahangaika, watoto kazi watu wengi, makambi imefukuza watu hapo, tunaona watu wa moteli hawana kazi, wale ambao wanafanya mjengo hata kuenda kutafuta kazi hakuna.
Mimi ni wa biashara tu ya uji. Coronavirus imetuletea njia mingi sana. Moso wengine wamekosa kazi, wana kazi. Wengine wako na shida mpaka hata pesa inatumwa tu kutoka nyumbani ndio wa survive.
Informal workers like Eunice make up 84% of Kenya's total workforce, according to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. A recent nationwide survey by the agency looking at the socio-economic impact of the coronavirus pandemic showed 49.9% of respondents had been asked to stay away or found themselves locked out by their employers following the government's directives, while 9 out of 10 persons who were absent from work due to stay away or lockdown guidelines were not sure when they would return to work. This uncertainty is echoed by many Kibera residents who appear to fear the continued threat to their livelihood more than a lurking virus. And this is despite the fact that it has been registering a high caseload over the last few weeks.
The issue of coronavirus in Kibera is really complicated. Many people still believe that it is a myth as a way for government to get money, and therefore they're not seeing any deaths. So they're like, what is this about?
This question was on the minds of many health experts monitoring the disease, which during the initial phase appeared to batter richer countries and leave many poorer countries relatively untouched. Some speculated that developing nations were insulated from the worst effects of the virus because they had younger populations, lower rates of diabetes, or warmer climates. Some of these theories were explored by infectious disease specialist Dr. Njenga Kariuki in a paper published in a recent issue of the American Journal of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene, where he makes a case for Africa coming out of this pandemic relatively unscathed.
The numbers I'm seeing in Kibera are not alarming. Is it a hotspot? Yes. Should we try and control it? Yes. Is what the government is doing, for example, closing Nairobi, good? Yes. That's important to try and stop the spread of this disease in a hotspot. But should I be so worried about Kibera? No.
Dr. Kariuki, who has been monitoring all kinds of coronaviruses in Africa for over 2 decades, believes we have seen the worst of the virus.
This virus, like other coronaviruses, will mutate, but not much enough to cause a brand new disease. This is not the type of virus. There are other viruses like influenza that we fear a lot about that. They can change completely outside of disease. This is not so. You're going to see papers and you're going to hear reports that the virus is changing. But for virologists like us, those changes are minor.
The changing times, however, for countless Kenyans are not minor. Since the pandemic hit Kenya in mid-March this year, cases of domestic violence have been on the rise. Here in Kibera, from an average of 150 cases reported in a month during the pandemic, that number has risen to 504, according to Shofco Gender Program coordinators.
Those are domestic violence cases, physical assault, we have child abuse cases, child labor defilement cases, sodomy cases.
In Mathare, the cases have now peaked at 405. Grace, not her real name, calls the slum home and started seeing things become more volatile when she was unable to support her husband with household expenses during the pandemic.
Maybe venye anafanyanga kazi mimi sifanyi, no wonder ananitesanga ama ananipiga. Yeah, but mimi nafikirianga although hata mimi nikikuwa na kazi yangu anaweza niheshimu, something like that. Juu sometimes nikikuwa na pesa tunakuwa furaha, mimi nikiwa na pesa ni baki tu kwa nyumba tuko na furaha, kama sina anaanza kunitesa hivyo hivyo.
Despite the lockdown in Isli, Rhoda, not her real name, had to find her way into the estate to earn a few shillings. Violating a government directive was the only way she and her 3 children would eat. While she was away, her 12-year-old daughter was defiled by a young man well known in her Mathare compound.
Mimi nilienda kutafuta riziki ya kila siku asubuhi. Kawaida yangu saa 12 vile naendanga. Nikawacha nimempea chai. Nikamwambia osha vyombo na uoge. Na pangusa nyumba, mimi naenda. Mimi nikaenda. Na nikamwambia pale ni wakati ya curfew. Nikamwambia kama sitakubaliwa kuingia Isili, nitarudi mapema. Akaniambia sawa mama. Kuja baadaye ndio nakuta hiyo kitendo imetendeka.
Their stories are just 2 of hundreds of victims that are crying for justice. But even then, that is hard to come by during the pandemic.
When you get to the police are saying they cannot do arrests simply because the issue of COVID-19, we're not doing any arrests. So what are we doing? We're just ensuring that the survivors are getting medical care, which is evidence, enough evidence, a medical report which is conclusive, which is evidence. We're hoping that when this COVID-19 will end, as they're saying, they will do arrests. So this is denying the survivors justice at the end of the day.
Margaret says this is seeing perpetrators roam free and further normalizing such behavior in these communities. And some of these invisible perpetrators are responsible for the rise in the very visible teen pregnancies being witnessed. This glaring headline took the country by surprise. The figures came from a Kenya Health Information System survey covering the months of January to May this year. According to the report, the cases peaked in March when schools closed.
I was in a relationship with that boy. Then I found myself pregnant. And I was deciding to abort, but I found it was risk. So I have decided to give birth and just grew up my child. Yeah.
Lisa, not her real name, is a Form 4 student who was to sit her KCSE exams later this year. It's a heart-rending reality. That of girls becoming mothers before they graduate high school, but one that Plan International's Kate Vorley is not surprised by.
Have we seen teenage pregnancies before? Certainly. I think we all remember 2018 when we had a case of 12,000 children, over 10,000 children in Kwale who sat for the exams pregnant. A lot of dispute then around the numbers. It was later confirmed by the Ministry of Health that it was actually 17,000. And it started a whole national debate around teenage pregnancies, sexual reproductive health rights, parents and caregiving. So we're not surprised. This is the knock-on effects of the pandemic. It's the shadow pandemic that we are beginning to see being rolled out here.
Last October, Plan International carried out a child's rights situation analysis in 8 counties, including Nairobi, Kisumu, Homa Bay, Kilifi, Kwale, Machakos, Kajiado, and Tharaka Nithi. It found a whopping 98% of girls who have ever been pregnant in those counties are out of school. The question now becoming, what is the way forward, with thousands of girls at risk of dropping out of school this year?
We must revive and enhance our re-entry program, ensuring that schools are ready to receive these girls who will most undoubtedly will become mothers now. So short-term education programs to catch up and re-enter the formal system, accelerated education and catch-up programs, that include flexible teaching schedules to facilitate participation of girls who now will become mothers. These are some of the priority interventions that we should be thinking of.
Those and other interventions will be critical in helping vulnerable communities rise again from this second blow of the shadow pandemic that threatens both life and livelihood.